morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bob Wood, and on behalf of the Agenda Alexandria and our board and the members, I'd like to welcome you this evening. We decided to, under the topic of the disruptive economy, have a disruptive location. We're very happy to bring it over here to really just a remarkable setting, a remarkable place. And I think this place is special for a variety of reasons. We scheduled a soccer match, it's just not ongoing, that's all, down below. But this is a brand new setting, a brand new place. If you want to know much more about this, we are happy to provide that information. We may in fact even have a program about this as things proceed. If you have any questions about Alexandria Renew, Bill Dickinson, where are you? Bill Dickinson, sitting at this table, who has served diligently on the board here, building this out, understanding the issues. Bill can answer any question you wish to have. I asked him to run nighttime tours after this. No, don't do it. We won't do that. But Bill is part of the really the team that has put this building, this setting, and this function together. So thank you, Bill, for being with us tonight. Thank all of you for being with us tonight. How many of you this is your first Agenda Alexandria meeting? Go ahead and raise your hand. All right, take a look, take a look. We thank you very much for coming. This is really the largest crowd we've had in the Agenda Alexandria in a while. I'll leave it to Donna and others to tell us when that might have been. But we are really, in the last 2 or 3 years, certainly the largest we've had. The board met last summer, decided to move the event around 2 times in the year. This is one of the first ones we've done, and it seems we all found it. Of course, you were helped along brilliantly by, I think, 2 of the best parking attendants I've ever seen. That's Frank Fannin and Janet. Let's hear it for them. Anyway, they were fully remunerated for this. The tips were appreciated, not. But Frank, we did, and Janet, thanks so much for getting us in. Thanks for everybody. This is a working board. This board has been out setting out chairs, setting out the meals, working with our caterer. We're very happy to be part of the building a new presence and a new place with you as our new and always enduring customers. Thank you so much for being here. We are going to talk about the disruptive economy. A couple people I want to thank before we get into that. The actual really basis of how we get this done is for the meals that we sell, the advertisers who work with us, and really those who are just supporters. We have a variety of ways to support Agenda Alexandria. We talk about the issues without taking sides. This is about the disruptive economy. Who could be against or for it? It's hard to understand it to begin with. But we're happy that you're here to be a part of the conversation. On your table, there's these colored notepads. Please feel free to ask a question. We'll come around, pick up the questions, and hand them to our moderator extraordinaire, Michael Lee Pope. We are going to acknowledge those who are here, our sponsors. I'd like to, we've got Paul here, 501c Fit. Paul, where are you? Wave your hand. All right. Paul, where are you? Oh, he's pushing through the line, I think, right now. The Chamber of Commerce is a sponsor. We're glad you're with us. Florence, FMK Incorporated, Financial Literacy Center. Florence, thank you very much for sponsoring with us. The Hoffheimer Security, Captain Token, the magician, Louis Hoffheimer. Are you with us? Are you with us? Back in the back, right here. Thank you very much for sponsoring and being part of the team. Honest Air Heating and Air Conditioning. Donna, let's say hi to Donna. All right, thank you, our Executive Director. Thank you, Donna. Life and Estate Planning Law Center, Barbara Anderson. Thank you very much. We have Gant Redmond, Fran and Gant with us, Redmond, Peyton, and Raswell. I know you're with us right up front row center. Here we are. Thank you for being with us tonight. We have Simpson Development, Donnie Simpson. I'm not sure I saw him come in. All right, thank you so much to our sponsors. More, we have State Farm with Ann. I didn't see Ann come in. We have Frank Fenn and SunTrust Mortgage. We know Frank's here. You saw him downstairs. Yay, Frank. Janet, thank you. Synergy Home Care, appreciate it. I know Connie's here. Thank you very much, Connie. Woods Landscaping and Sprinkler Service. Jim Wood, are you here? I'm his brother. Thank you very much for being here with us tonight. And the Zebra newspaper. Yay to the Zebra. They a wonderful article, great coverage, and great support to Agenda Alexandria. Thank you, Zebra. Well, we are, I will point out, by the way, that Rich McGuire is with us, right? I had to leave early. Okay, he was with us at the table. You saw him coming in. He's also built a large ad on the inside front cover of our program. Thank you very much. Our corporate sponsors, Senior Service of Alexandria, Union Street Pub, and Reunions. Special thanks to Bittersweet. You're enjoying their fare right now. Never too late to support Agenda Alexandria. You can purchase a membership. Right on your table is a brochure. It shows you the program we have coming up. We have a wonderful program dealing with the Freedmen and the Freedmen's history in Alexandria. Florence has led that team. That's the next program in February. Happy to have it. Shape it up beautifully. The one after that is called Here Come the Millennials. Who's a millennial in here? Right, there we go, we got one and two. So what we want to do is bring them in front, get them front and center, and we appreciate, by the way, the TC Williams team, all millennials who are filming and recording the event tonight. Thank you, TC Williams. Appreciate it being here. Let's give them a hand. If you're a member of the board, please stand up and wave. There we are. Everywhere, Frank, thank you very much. On the back, in the back, both of them back there. All right, so that is a working board. We're glad to be part of the team. We're glad that we can bring you the program. And I'd like to now introduce Michael. Michael will introduce his panel. We'll take it from there. We'll eat for a while, talk for a while, and the questions are most important. So remember to write down that question, send them in. We'll have people running around the tables. We'll bring them up to Michael, and he'll decide to neglect all the board questions and take yours. Thank you so much for being here, Michael. Over to you.
Okay, this is really exciting. As Bob was just saying, we've never been at this venue before. Raise your hand if you've ever been to the Alexandria Renew building ever before. Okay, raise your hand if you've never been to the Alexandria Renew building. You've never seen this building. What an amazing building this is. I have to say, it's dark right now, so we can't see this awesome view behind us, but there's a really great view of the Beltway out here. I had an opportunity to be here during the day. Later, after this is over with, you should walk over to the window and avail yourself of this view because it's really amazing. So we're kind of disrupting Agenda Alexandria a little bit by being here, which is appropriate considering what we're going to be talking about, the disruptive economy. We'll get into what that means. But I want to introduce our panel in no particular order. I'm going to start with Patricia Washington. Raise your hand, Patricia. She is the president and CEO of the Alexandria Convention and Visitors Association, also known as Visit Alexandria. I think they prefer to be called Visit Alexandria. I still call you the ACVA. That's fine. So she is a native of Philadelphia. She has a bachelor's degree of performing arts from Howard University and a Juris Doctorate from Howard University. Before joining the ACVA in 2012, she was vice president of cultural tourism for Greater Philadelphia Tourism Marketing Corporation, also known as Visit Philly. Right? Do you see the parallels there? Please pronounce your name, Che. Could I make sure I'm pronouncing it right?
It's Che Rudel Tabasola.
Rudel Tabasola. Okay, actually, I'm glad that we did this. And can I get all the panelists right now to grab your microphone and pull it as close to you as you possibly can without breaking the cords? Okay, all right. Maybe. So when you talk, if you could talk into the microphone, that would be great. Che is political director for the National Food Truck Association and co-owner of Barbecue Bus Smokehouse. Did I say that right?
That's right.
Or is it BBQ?
BBQ.
BBQ. BBQ Bus Smokehouse. A native of Los Angeles, he has a bachelor's degree in English from Mount St. Mary's College and a Master of International Conflict Analysis from the University of Kent in Brussels. Did I say that right?
You did.
Okay. He is former executive director of the DMV Food Truck Association. So, when you think about disruptive economy, a lot of people think about Airbnb, you think about Uber, you think about Lyft. Food trucks are a very important part of the disruptive economy. And then over here closest to me, we've got my good friend, Frank Shafroth, who is director of the Center for State and Local Leadership at George Mason University, a native of Littleton, Colorado. He has a bachelor's degree in political science from Stanford University and a Juris Doctorate from Georgetown University. Before joining the faculty at George Mason, he was chief of staff for former Congressman Jim Moran. He also worked for Arlington County and the Senate Banking Committee. You're not missing the Senate Banking Committee. That's the old days, right? So we also have Corey Urshu. Am I pronouncing that right? I got totally wrong, didn't I? Urshu?
Urshau.
Urshau,
Yeah.
excuse me. He is a native of West Orange, New Jersey, and he has a bachelor's degree in political science from Rutgers, a law degree from George Washington. He was a transportation staffer on the Hill before joining the Obama administration in the Department of Energy, where he worked in electric vehicles. He is now the transportation policy manager for Lyft, which is a ride-sharing app, ride-hailing app. I think their language actually is evolving on what you call these things, right? Transportation something or other, whatever. We'll get into all that. So I'm going to put my friend Frank Shafroth on the spot here as the first question, and I wanted to ask Mr. Shafroth about the use of disruptive economy. So in the Agenda Alexandria group, when we were talking about having this panel, we were talking about disruptive economy. And some of our board members said, disruptive economy, what's that? I've never heard of that before. Explain, Mr. Shafroth, what is the actually, I'm sorry, before Mr. Shafroth starts speaking, 2 points I want to point out, just in terms of what's happening in the room. If you want to ask a question, we want your questions. There are board members walking around who are going to take any question you want to write out on the Post-it notes. They'll bring it up here. You can also tweet your questions, which will show up here. Anyone using the hashtag disruptive economy, that will show up in the screen behind me. If you put the @ for Agenda Alexandria, if you put the handle Agenda Alexandria in your tweet, it will show up in this board behind me, good or bad, right? We're not editing these. If you use the hashtag, if you use the @ it will show up in this board behind me.
How many know what a hashtag is?
Raise your hand if you don't know what a hashtag is.
All right, so be careful.
You can write on the post. So, but if you use disruptive economy as a hashtag, it will show up there. Okay, so for the tweeters in the audience, Mr. Shafroth, what exactly is the disruptive economy?
The easiest way to describe the disruptive economy is something has changed for which a local government or a state government has not thought about, so there are no rules, there are no regulations, there are no tax issues that are taken care of, and something is disrupting and changing everything, and meaning some of your constituents are being treated in a way they regard reasonably is unfair. They're subject to tax, they're subject to public safety regulations, they're competing against people who don't play by the same rules. And whether it's Parcheesi or chess or governing, you want to try and make sure everyone plays by the same rules.
So isn't there also some amount of ownership? Ownership plays an important role in the disruptive economy, is that right?
Well, ownership does. Maybe a different way to think about this. When we did our first publication on the disruptive economy, I asked my students, who were all employees of local governments in Northern Virginia, I said, before you put pen to paper or key or finger to key on your keyboard, you need to meet with one of your elected officials. And you need to ask how many Airbnbs there are in their jurisdiction in Virginia. Do not write a word, do not think about what you're going to do until you get an answer to that question. So I asked the first student, I said, so what did your supervisor say? She said, well, Professor, the supervisor said that in Prince William County there are no Airbnbs. I said, what did you do? She said, I looked at my iPhone underneath the table and I said, excuse me, but there are 1,701 Airbnbs in Prince William County. I said, and what did your elected official do? She said, the elected official said, well, so what? And I said, and what did you say? She said, so that means that we have hotels, we have inns that are paying taxes, that are subject to special rules to protect people from fires and other things, to protect their driveways from being blocked in. But we have people competing against them who are subject to no rules and no taxes. So we have an inequitable situation that is disrupting the economy of our county.
All right, so now I want to move over to our two disruptors on the far end of the panel. I'm going to start with Corey Horseshoe. So a lot of people in this room have probably heard of Uber and have taken an Uber. Raise your hand if you've ever been in an Uber. Uber somewhere. Okay. Right. Raise your hand if you've never been in an Uber, don't really know how it works, probably wouldn't do it if you could. Okay, all right. That's interesting numbers. All right. So you take the Lyft. Okay, good.
Hey, good answer.
You're segueing right into my introduction. So explain a little bit what exactly is Lyft, and if anything, how does it differ from Uber?
So, Lyft and our primary competitor both fall under the category of transportation network company. You referred to them earlier as ride sharing, ride hailing. Just quick show of hands. Who is familiar with the concepts, or rather, who is not familiar with the concept of ride sharing company or transportation network company?
Yes, I'm actually, can I put you on pause because I had the same question, because in the journalism world, there was a huge debate several years ago. Do we call these companies ride sharing apps? Do we call them ride hailing apps? And there was an intense discussion about what to call these things, right? What do you call them, and is there a difference in the vocabulary as far as you're concerned?
As long as you call us, I don't really care what.
Touche.
Give your number. You need to give your number right now.
Yeah, right. So we are an app-based mobility platform which will connect you from where you are with a driver nearby who will take you door to door right to your destination. We have been around since late 2011, 2012, and really, so we're very, very young industry. It is on-demand mobility. And it is a convenient and affordable way to get around. And to give a little bit of background, our company originated when our founders sort of independently looked around and noticed that so many people are driving cars, and they're driving those cars alone. Cars spend about 95% of their lives, per se, parked. And even when they're in operation, there's usually only one person in them. It's about 20% occupancy rate. If this were a business, it would have failed a long, long time ago. And so they developed Lyft as a way to improve the efficiency of the transportation sector and ultimately to get more people into fewer vehicles.
Okay, we're going to move on to our other disruptor, Jay. I would bet there are a lot of people in this room who would love to eat lunch at a food truck, or get their lunch at a food truck. But then if you wander around Alexandria, you will notice there are no food trucks in Alexandria, right? Or if there are, they're very few and far between. Explain why that is. So if you go to DC, it's huge. If you're on 14th Street, if you're anywhere near the mall, in the past decade, there's been an explosion of food trucks. If you're in Arlington, if you're in Roslyn or Crystal City, you will see tons of food trucks. If you come to Old Town, if you're in the business district, if you're in Carlisle, here where we are right now, you're not going to see a food truck at lunchtime. Why is that?
So I'll talk about it for a second, but to the professor's definition of disruptive economies, I'd like to add to that they're largely market-driven as well. So this is more than just an issue of how you're regulated or taxed. But none of us would be here if the market didn't want that, right? If there was a dissatisfaction with how taxis operate. Sorry. Is this a little bit better? So what I had said is I'd like to add to the definition that disruptive technologies are market-driven, right? Email is a disruptive technology to letter writing, right? And it's because the market, that's what it's wanted. Alexandria is hard. I used to work for our local food truck association. I'm now the political director for the National Food Truck Association. We work in a number of jurisdictions. And Alexandria was exceptional. And it was a case, what we did here at Alexandria, we didn't really have a set of food truck regulations to reflect the modern industry. In 2014, we went through a legislative process to pass new regulations, and it was really a classic case of indulging your cultural and economic insecurities, frankly. There was a real sense that if we let food trucks into Old Town, we're going to kill the nature of Old Town. If we let food trucks into Alexandria, we're going to kill the brick and mortar restaurants. I can tell you, looking across jurisdictions across the country, there is no empirical evidence of any of those things happening. And so what we got here with Alexandria is a very top-heavy regime. It's similar to what we have in Prince George's County, which also suffers from a very unvibrant curbside vending scene, where it's somewhat engineered. We want this food truck here, we want to have a cupcake truck here, we want to have this here. which is often what government regulators will do, but it has very little handle on how the market works, on how the real world works. And the problem with that is that from a public policy point of view, and in terms of regulators, there is a public policy argument to be made that regulators and government officials and our elected officials, so it should increase access to food. It should increase access to affordable, freshly prepared food, increase access to affordable and innovative transportation options, right? And we didn't see that here in Alexandria.
We're going to circle back around to that, but you just said some things that Patricia Washington might want to comment on. In fact, the line that sort of struck me was there is no evidence that food trucks have ever harmed a brick and mortar restaurant. You said something to that effect, right?
No, I mean, so if you look at our mid-Atlantic region, the most popular destination between Virginia, Maryland, and DC for food trucks is Farragut Square. And when the food trucks started vending there in 2009, we had some vacant storefronts. So what happens is Potbelly, Paul, we have all these brick and mortar restaurants open across the street from Farragut Square. And then we have dozens of food trucks who've gone into the brick and mortar game. My food truck opened in 2011, and then last July we opened our own brick and mortar. It's an incubator, it's a job multiplier, but restaurants close every day for a million reasons, but you have to, I would dare anybody here to show me a restaurant that closed because a food truck parked on their block.
Well, I would put that question to Patricia Washington. What do restaurants feel? What's their reaction to this issue of food trucks?
Well, I think this is an issue that's been, we have an established policy. We've already had a lot of public comment about this issue. So, I don't want to reopen that conversation right now, because right now, right now we have both. We have a very robust restaurant scene, and we have some food trucks. And I think that may be the proper balance for Alexandria based on the feedback from the community and restaurateurs that we've received, especially in Old Town, which is a nationally important historic district. So what we're seeing is a trend of food trucks, like you were saying, opening brick and mortar restaurants. So, for example, we have Smoking Cow Barbecue is the newest food truck to open a brick and mortar operation in Alexandria, joining Meg Rolls in Old Town, which also is a new food truck now of brick and mortar. So we also have Rocklands, we have Pop Republic. So these are operations that started as food trucks, now have brick and mortar operations, and I love the concept of food trucks because there's a low barrier to entry. Just like pop-ups, it gives people an opportunity to test the market and try new things. So, and we're seeing that we're seeing that here in Alexandria as well.
But I have to add to that, Patricia, Dylan from Smoking Cow never street vended in Alexandria because there was never enough opportunities. He cut his teeth. He built his business in D.C. because there's a regulatory environment there that allowed him to flourish. And it's great he's in Alexandria. He's got great food. He's got a great Georgia gold sauce. And that's a good thing for him. But he is not opening a brick and mortar in Alexandria because of the regulatory environment here.
Reaction?
Yes, but when he was looking for a brick and mortar opportunity, he came here because he knows there's a market, there's a robust restaurant community that's well marketed, and he can be part of this restaurant community.
I'm going to interject here and ask Frank Shafroth to give us some context. So one of our questions that we have from the audience on an old-fashioned Post-it note, which you can give to your board member, and he will bring it up here. Or you can also post your questions online using the hashtag Disruptive Economy. But I have a Post-it note question here that I'm going to direct to Mr. Shafroth, which is more of a context question. New ideas, new concepts have been emerging for the millennia. And these new ideas have challenged conventions or the status quo forever. So when you think about the disruptive economy, I'm sorry. Is the sense that we're only just now experiencing disruption as a result of the new reality, or merely the fact that we have a new vocabulary to help us? Okay, so I want to piggyback on this a little bit and say that if you think about the disruptive economy, you could think about the printing press as being a disruptor, a huge disruptor, changed how the world thought about words, right? I work in...
changed religion.
Also changed religion. I used to work in the newspaper business. I no longer work in the newspaper business because it was disrupted. I also, I'm going to date myself here, but I used to work in the video rental industry, right? The video rental industry no longer works. It no longer exists. Right, exactly. It wasn't Blockbuster, but it was like a locally owned version of Blockbuster. So disruption has sort of always been around, right? So what's different about what we're experiencing now?
I think the scale is different. Think if you were a New York City taxi driver and you got your medallion in the last 5 years, you might have paid upwards of $1 million. Day one with ride-sharing programs, that $1 million is disappearing through the bottom. Think if you were the former city manager for the city of Alexandria and your name was Phil Sunderland, and you got to spend a year negotiating with the ride-sharing programs and the taxi industry. How do you provide some level of equity so that the taxis, which are licensed specifically to pick you up at National Airport, forgive me if I don't call it Reagan Airport, or at Dulles, and it was a year of negotiation in each place, just trying to figure out how do you ensure that you're being equitable in treating the different parties. Easier here because you don't have the medallion issue which you have in New York City. How do you deal in Chicago? In Chicago, when you bring into certain neighborhoods that are low and moderate income neighborhoods, Airbnb, it has an immediate impact on rents. Rents rise, and families that are low to moderate income can no longer afford to live in those areas. So when I look at disruption, I tend to think of it from a governance aspect and from a human aspect. How is it treating people that are in different conditions?
Yeah, I'd actually love to follow up on that. I think that the human aspect is one that really needs to be emphasized here. And it's not just the human aspect of the industries, but how people's lives are impacted by the various industries for things like convenience, for things like health externalities. About a year and a half ago, my father had a health event that is, I'm sure, probably familiar to many people in this room, in which he was not able to drive a car for a period of about 6 months. And then living in the suburbs, there's not much you can do historically if you can't drive a car. And if anybody's tried to order a taxi and see what happens by calling ahead and say, yeah, please come pick me up now, good luck. I once waited around 2 hours to get picked up because I was not on the regular route. Because this happened about a year and a half ago, my father was able to use Lyft, and was able to use Lyft to go to the grocery store. He's able to use Lyft to go to the doctor's office. This is something that happens every day because people now have new mobility options. And now you have an opportunity not just to have mobility on demand when you want it and need it, but for our drivers, they have the ability to go and make some extra cash when they need it. More than 90% of our drivers are either retired, have another full-time job, or full-time students. This is a way to make a little bit of extra cash on their spare time using an asset which they already have. The human benefit here has been tremendous, and so has the benefit to local economies. We just put out our economic impact report. Lyft passengers last year alone spent over $86 million in additional spending in DC because they were able to get around safely. They didn't have to worry about going to a part of town where they didn't know if they could get a cab home or take public transportation, and so they didn't have to drive. And so they're able to stay out a little bit later, buy a few extra things. They're able to go to new parts of town which have been revitalized now that there is transportation equality. So I think the human aspect here is really one that is important. It's not just folks who are in the disrupted industries, but it's folks who are benefiting from the new technologies and the new opportunities.
And I would add to that for the Airbnb case, don't forget that Airbnb has provided a source of entrepreneurship for a number of folks with underutilized space and housing. And actually, I know in DC this is a big debate about whether or not Airbnb is affecting affordable housing. I actually don't think there's any empirical evidence of that. But what I do know is, because we have some folks who work for us at Barbecue Bus and they manage properties, right? They have rental properties, and that Airbnb is allowing them to rent their properties in a way that they couldn't before. And then what we also see are some bed and breakfasts and smaller inns and motels now advertising on Airbnb.
So actually, you just made a point that I remember reading in Mr. Shafroth's report about the disruptive economy, which had to do with the concern that local governments should have about the potential decimation of affordable housing by investors going into neighborhoods and buying properties specifically to rent them out, and therefore undercutting the amount of affordable housing properties. And I will actually have to say, before I throw it over to you, I recently was part of a documentary. I was interviewed as part of the documentary, and they rented out a house that I would imagine would be sort of affordable housing, and they set up all their lighting in there, and they did a number of interviews. And I think there's someone else in this room actually who was interviewed for the same documentary. And so that was used essentially as a studio, a very low end. I mean, this is from the production company's point of view, they didn't have to spend a lot of money that they would have otherwise had to spend. So, and this would, as I said, I would imagine this would probably be in a neighborhood I would imagine is affordable housing at this particular house. So is there a concern? Should local governments, Mr. Shafroth, be concerned about investors buying properties to rent them out through Airbnb and thereby decimating the amount of affordable housing that is in the community?
Well, one could say not only should they, but of course many have. It's been a big issue in New Orleans, understandably, a big tourist city. It's been one in Chicago because it was affecting low-income housing opportunities because rents went up in portions of the city that were significant users of Airbnb. So when those rents went up, it forced out a lot of low and moderate income families that could no longer afford the rent. So different cities have chosen to deal with the issue in different ways, but it's clearly had an impact.
So a question from the audience. I wanted Corey to talk about self-driving plans for Uber and Lyft. I know this is actually something that you spend a lot of time looking at. So I was chatting with him about this earlier. He has a lot to say about this. Interestingly, Frank Shafroth has done a lot of work on self-driving cars too. So these two could go. We could have a whole separate panel discussion about self-driving cars. But go ahead.
All right. Well, I love this question. Quick show of hands. Who here thinks they're a good driver? Yeah, you're wrong. The fact of the matter is, more than 90% of all motor vehicle accidents are caused by human error and human error alone. The fact is, we have in some ways, evolutionary deficiency, which is only two eyes facing in one direction. With self-driving cars, you can take the human factor out of the equation altogether. And what that's going to enable us to do is not only reduce vehicle accidents and thus vehicle fatalities, of which last year there were over 40,000 in the United States, to, if not zero, then pretty close to it. It's going to be able to drive down the cost of mobility altogether. As was mentioned before, my previous job was in electric vehicles. Electric vehicles have a lot of great benefits. They are obviously much cleaner, much better for the environment. They can, if used properly, help to reduce overall electric rates. But adoption of EVs has been very difficult because they tend to be a little bit more expensive up front, and people are not familiar with the technology, and people are have this perception that they're going to run out of battery and be stranded somewhere. But if you have autonomous vehicles, particularly autonomous vehicles that are operating as part of a shared fleet like Lyft's, you can get that cost of mobility down even further, and it's much less expensive to operate an electric vehicle than it is a conventional gas car. And so what that's going to enable us to do is to electrify the overall fleet much faster. So that's going to mean significantly better air quality, reduced greenhouse gas emissions. It's going to mean cheaper mobility overall because the cost of mobility for us to operate is going to be that much lower. And ultimately, what self-driving cars have the potential to do is really let us move to mobility as a service. Right now, we're a pretty affordable product. We're not so affordable that you can use us for every single trip you're ever going to want to take. We're hoping to get to that point soon. Autonomous vehicles are going to really help us do that. And right now, when the cost of car ownership is about $9,500 a year on average, if we can get to a fraction of that for mobility, and particularly what we call mobility as a service or mobility by subscription, where some people may need to drive or may need a ride twice a month, some people may need it every day, and then you can price a plan accordingly. All of this is possible with autonomous vehicles. And particularly autonomous vehicles operating as part of a shared fleet like Lyft's.
When is this going to happen?
So we actually have a couple of pilots going on right now. We launched last month in Boston, in the Seaport neighborhood, where if you order a Lyft, it may be in a self-driving car. We also just had a program out in Las Vegas last week where there's some fun YouTube videos. There was this, for those of you who don't know, there's a major technology conference called CES every year in January in Las Vegas. We ran a pilot where you could pick up a self-driving Lyft, and there were a number of these pilots run by other companies. Ours was the only one to operate as a true door-to-door without going on sort of a fixed route. For those of you who are familiar with Lyft as a product, after every ride, you're asked to rate that ride on a 0 to 5 stars. We did the same with the self-driving cars. The average rating came out to 4.997 stars, which is just staggering. I don't think there's a driver in the country who's got that kind of rating.
Mr. Shafroff, the future is now, right? We're living in the future, aren't we?
We're living in the future. I think there are two important parts to this. Number one, the issue of parking, which has been an issue in the local papers in Alexandria. The issue of parking is going to change profoundly. You're going to be able to eliminate 1 out of every 3 parking spots. So that changes some of the discussions in this city. I know the Arlington County manager called me when we did a report. He said, "What the hell am I going to do with all that excess space?" I said, well, the number one issue to Arlington County voters is green space. If you took simply 1/3 of the parking spots that would be eliminated with self-driving cars and turned that into green space, the Arlington County Board would be reelected for life. Just think about that. The second thing is, with the exception of all of you gathered here tonight, everyone else in America is growing older. Now what that means is there are an increasing number of people, no one in this room, who probably ought not to be behind the wheel of a car. So now we have a pioneering small city in Florida where an increasing percent of the population is no longer with a car. They have access, they've connected the city's transit system with self-driving cars so that seniors no longer have to worry about driving.
So we have a question from Twitter that I want to put to Patricia Washington. Is there evidence to suggest that TNC, in other words, the Uber and Lyft drivers, or e-room rental companies, the Airbnbs of the world, that they're harming Alexandria businesses? In other words, have you can't speak to the taxi industry necessarily, but I'm curious about the hotel industry. What is the state of the hotel industry? Has it been undercut by this massive growth in recent years that we've seen of Airbnb?
No, we haven't seen any evidence of Airbnb cutting into hotel performance right now. Right now, what we're seeing is 3 straight record years of hotel occupancy above 70%. It's about 73% for the last fiscal year, well above the national average of 64%. So right now, and even with some of the increase in in the number of hotels, we're still seeing average daily rate go up. So, so right now the numbers don't bear out that we're seeing this this change. But what I do want to say about what you were saying about sort of leveling the playing field, I think that was the motivation behind Visit Alexandria and our hotel community getting behind the registration of homestay houses. So,
Wait, can I put you on pause there?
Sure.
Mr. Shafroth, explain what she's talking about. What is the registration of homestay houses? What has happened in the past year that has changed this game?
What's happened is that Alexandria, Arlington, most cities and counties in Virginia have established rules to, in effect, level the playing field between the hospitality industry and home sharing. So that, for instance, my immediate neighbor, who was running a vast unregulated home sharing program with lots and lots of people, no longer theoretically is permitted to do that. And the whole idea was to say, if you will run a hotel or a lodge, you ought not to be discriminated against by government rules or fees or taxes.
Now, one interesting sort of footnote to that is that the different jurisdictions have handled this very differently. Arlington, we have an Arlington board member with us this evening, they did something before the Virginia General Assembly passed a law. Alexandria waited for the General Assembly to pass a law and then used that law to create a registry that they're just now launching. Talk a little bit about the different ways Arlington and Alexandria have handled what's called home sharing, Airbnb. You can rent out your entire house or a room in your house using an app on your phone.
well, I think some cities have used the registry as a way of driving Airbnb and the like out of business. But I think to the credit of Alexandria's Hotel Association and hotel industry, they took a more progressive approach.
I'm sorry, who's more progressive? Say it again?
Our approach, I think the city and the hotels took a more progressive approach in terms of saying, hey, look, this is not going anywhere. We have to embrace it, not try to drive it out of business, but embrace it. But simply capture the revenue, and we calculated just through our calculation when we were doing the advocacy for this was over $500,000 of lost revenue that the city wasn't capturing. So we need to capture the revenue. The other important part of this is also having the same consumer protections in homestays as we do for hotels. That's very important to protect consumers.
You know, that's actually a really thorny issue because from an employee standpoint, people who work in hotels, they have vacation time, they have sick time. If you're renting out your house through Airbnb, you are your own employer. You have no sick time, you have no family leave time. So that's actually a more thorny issue than it might seem on the surface. Food truck question. Let's shift to food trucks here. So this is from the audience. Parking, food trucks and parking. Isn't parking a problem with food trucks? In other words, the width of the street. So your food trucks are hogging up valuable parking spaces, aren't they?
No. No, I would argue that food trucks are actually one of the most one of the best utilizations of a parking space. I mean, a food truck in a parking space could feed 100 people from that one space, as opposed to somebody driving to a restaurant, parking in that space. Maybe they bring 3 or 4 friends with them to that restaurant. Food trucks are a highly efficient way to use public space, frankly. The thing is, what we have in Alexandria is we've got very limited spaces where the trucks can park. The hours, I do think most of the vendors in Alexandria, there's only 11 or 12 vendors in Alexandria who will vend here. And we've got well over 500 in the region. The hours are a little too long. It's, I think, from like 11 to 6 or 7 p.m., and I think most of the vendors are looking for a lunchtime business. Utilization of public space, turnover of parking spaces are very valid public space argument management issues to work through. But no, I mean, a food truck in a parking space is far more efficient than any private vehicle.
So actually, you just hinted at something that there's a frustration I'm hearing from the questions is, what can Alexandria do to get more food trucks? Obviously, you mentioned earlier the regulations as they currently exist are top-heavy, I think is the word you used, the expression you used. So what could change that would bring more food trucks to Alexandria if we wanted that?
Sure. I think, one, I'll reflect back on our experience in 2014, and much of that debate and controversy was driven by Old Town, right? And I think it's fair to say much of the politics in Alexandria is driven by Old Town. Alexandria's a really big place, right? When we were talking about, I remember there was a comment made during our hearing, and we do advocacy in a number of legislations, and I'll be very honest, Alexandria, we got beat up pretty badly. We had, I think it was a 7 to 8 hour public hearing. Well over 70 people testified, only 12 in favor of food trucks, 4 of which were Doug the Food Dude's kids. And that was a really hard day. I think, and somebody during that hearing made a comment that if you pass these regulations, you're going to see food trucks up and down the on King Street from the metros or the waterfront. And that's a flat out lie. That was never part of the regulations. And frankly, from a business point of view, the density doesn't support that. It would never work. And so I think what we see in places like Los Angeles, DC, New York, where you have vibrant curbside vending scenes, we have food trucks operate within certain public space management things that work, right? A food truck needs to be so far away from a crosswalk for visibility reasons. A food truck can be here for so many hours. And let the market, let people figure out where they want their trucks. Don't let the government tell you where you can get your food truck. I mean, it sounds very simple. It sounds like a very simple concept, but that's, you can't engineer these things, right? And I think that was the approach that we see not only in Alexandria but in other jurisdictions where people are telling you, you're going to get your food truck here, this is what you're going to eat, and you're going to like it. And that, in sum, is what happened here in Alexandria.
So, question from the audience. The questioner is suggesting that Uber and Lyft have bought the politicians, so to keep things equitable. Are municipalities relaxing rules for taxis? Respond.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could probably look at foreclosure documents to see that that's not true. But when it really comes down to it, we as an industry don't view taxis as the competition. The competition as we see it are personally driven vehicles. We still comprise over 75% of commuters who are driving that car alone. We're not trying to supplement, we're not trying to get people to choose to use us instead of another for-hire vehicle they may have used in the past. We're trying to get them to use us instead of driving their car, instead of owning their car, instead of having to circle around looking for parking. And we're starting to see the signs of that. Last year, over 250,000 Lyft users gave up a personal vehicle because of the availability of our services. I've lived in DC now for almost a decade. At times I've had a car. I don't want one anymore. I don't need one anymore because I have the availability of an on-demand, affordable service when I need it. You combine that with the other multimodal aspects in the area, such as Metro and Capital Bike Share and some of the really great walking trails we've got now. There's no reason to have a car anymore, at least when you live somewhere that's dense enough to justify it. That's our goal on a widespread basis, to get more people to choose to give up their cars and live those more multimodal lifestyles.
Same questioner, but I didn't finish the question. This is interesting, though, because it sort of piggybacks on what you were just saying. Do you see the taxi industry gone in 10 to 20 years? And I'll just piggyback on that, which is we were chatting as we were eating dinner, and I asked him about the health of the taxi industry, and where he thought the taxi industry was. And his response was telling, which was what?
I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea.
And the reason he has no idea is because he doesn't see them as competition. Right? Explain that.
Well, I think I just did. I mean, as far as we as an industry are concerned, our competition are those privately driven vehicles, particularly those single occupancy vehicles. We can really replace a lot of vehicle miles traveled with more efficient shared ride services. Recent study came out by the Rocky Mountain Institute that showed that in cities like San Francisco, which has been a let's say a skeptic of services like ours, our lovely hometown, using rideshare services more than 20% as efficient for moving people around compared to a personally driven vehicle. That's what we're trying to end.
All right, another question for the audience I'm going to put to Patricia Washington, which is there a generational component to this discussion? So, I mean, I guess for purposes of your answer, in terms of Airbnb versus hotel, do you feel like people who stay at hotels you can put them in a certain generation, and perhaps people, maybe perhaps millennials, let's say for the sake of argument, where a millennial would be more likely to stay at an Airbnb versus a hotel. In other words, the reason, I guess what's really at the heart of this question is, do you foresee a problem for your industries looking ahead because of this generational divide?
I really see it as the pie getting bigger. I mean, even for you guys, it's like more people are going to come and eat because there's a diversity of choices. You know, more people are going to come to Alexandria because they have a diversity of choices in lodging. So, I also see it more as situational because, you know, some people may have kids, they want to come for over a week, and for them, perhaps Airbnb or homestay is the better way to go. And I have, you know, people who are older who choose Airbnb. I mean, right now it's become more, frankly, more mainstream. It's become more mainstream. But then there are other people who love their hotel brands and, you know, and want to use a hotel. But again, I really see it as the pie getting bigger, not like hotels going out of business. And I also see hotels adapting, you know, wanting to be more living like a local. If you look at Hotel Indigo, does that look like a traditional hotel to you? Hotel Indigo has local art, has a local restaurateur, is supporting the tall ship that, I mean, I'm sorry, not the tall ship, but the ship that was found through the archaeological dig. They want to have this close community connection and relationship because they know that consumers' desires and the trends are changing, and they have to adapt. They have to change to meet those.
In the immortal words of George W. Bush, we need to make the pie higher, right? Food truck question. Do food truck operators have liability insurance, or do they rely on bankruptcy?
First of all, Patricia, you're absolutely right.
Where's the lawyer? Yeah.
So, no, first of all, Patricia's absolutely right. This is about making the pie bigger. I think when you look at, this is what this is about. This is creating dynamic economic hubs. You want to have a variety, just from the food point of view, of cuisines, price points, right, and styles, and that's what you want. I would never want to be the only truck on the block. I don't know if people get how important it is. I want to be with 5 or 6 trucks. I'll be with another barbecue truck. This is just how people eat and make decisions about dining. So yes, we all do have GL insurance as well as workers' comp and then the motor insurance. And I think my policy is a 1/2. And that's because when you need it. I mean, if you're a responsible business owner, you have all that stuff. 1/2. So 1 per incident, 2 million aggregate. Lawyer? There's a lawyer in the room to help me with that. No, I mean, at one point, we actually drew out, I mean, our monthly overhead is well over $10,000 between the taxes, the insurance, the rent. It looks on the outside like a very small business, and for sure, it's a fraction. So let me frame this for you. We opened our food truck in 2011, and what we originally wanted to open was a brick and mortar sandwich shop, and that was the height of the recession, and nobody was lending, and they laughed us out of the bank. And my husband, he was working for a tech company that had gone through 3 rounds of layoffs, and it was just a matter of time before he got let go too. And so he grew up in his grandfather's restaurant. It's like, okay, let's try to make this work, right? We always were having people over, like, hey, Super Bowl party, Oscar party, right? Where those people in your family were constantly entertaining people. And so it's like, okay, let's try to make a living out of what we love to do. And nobody was lending us money. So we were able to open up our food truck for $98,000. And now 7 years later, we actually have the sandwich shop that we originally wanted. And we started out with, and it took us that long, and we're in a developing area of DC up on Georgia Avenue. It's an amazing community. We love being there. It used to be Tad and I. Now it's Tad and I plus 13 employees. We just got a great streets grant in DC to put $50,000 of capital improvement into our place. A number of, first of all, and I don't want to go super tangent here, if it wasn't for the Great Recession, you wouldn't have seen the modern food truck industry bloom, because it created a number of aspiring restaurateurs who could no longer access capital, and it created a number of out-of-work construction vehicles. And number 3, from a policy point of view, which is what we started talking about, this is good policy, right? You want guys like us to be able to operate in a regulatory environment that allows us to pursue dreams without, you know, just because I couldn't get $1 million loan from the bank doesn't mean I should be denied any opportunities. And that's what happened to us, and our food truck allowed us to do that.
Following up on food truck question, so, excuse me, question from Twitter. Where can food trucks be located in Alexandria? Give us a mental map. Like, where are we going to find these?
Sure. So it's King Street Gardens, Eisenhower, and Braddock Road metros, and then
Street Gardens is known as the Hat, right?
yes,
So the Eisenhower Metro Station?
Eisenhower right there, King Street over there, Braddock Metro up there.
Right.
And then during the summer, the Patent and Trade Office, because the employees had such a demand for food trucks, would pull a special events permit, and food trucks were there, I believe, once a week.
Mr. Shaproff, question from the audience. Is the disruptive economy mostly under 30-year-olds? Maybe the taxes could be changed for small, young businesses. So is there a generational component here to either the businesses or the taxing?
You know, I don't think so. While I understand no one in this room is growing older, a lot of Airbnbs are run by people like older Alexandrians who, you know, like us, our 3 kids have left. They're in San Francisco, Boston, and Omaha. So, you know, we're in a house that now where we raise 3 children. Once in a while we get a grandchild that visits, but we have a lot of empty space. So I'm finding that Airbnb is used by a lot of older people who like having young people. They make a little extra money with that spare space. So they're reaching a choice: either we move out because the house is too big, or we have the benefit of making a little revenue that helps us in our later years, particularly if that Social Security isn't quite cutting the check, and we get to meet people.
Okay, question for Lyft. The New York Times recently had a story about Uber, and I guess we posted the question Lyft, causing more traffic, not less.
Yeah.
Particularly because cars idling, blocking traffic. Talk a little bit about this. What's your reaction to that?
The Schaller report. It's gotten quite a bit of press. I'm just going to throw some very simple arithmetic at you, and in New York, more than 250,000 vehicles commute into the city every single day. Commute into Manhattan, either from other boroughs or from New Jersey and Connecticut. 250,000 vehicles every day. This report found that at a given time, there were maybe 10,000 for-hire vehicles on the road at a time. So you tell me what's causing that congestion. Now, it's true that New York tends to have narrower streets. Deliveries have skyrocketed along with e-commerce. As the economy has improved, you have tons of construction, which is also choking off lanes. And yeah, we now have a new technology that has has vehicles that are on the road. But that, 10, 11,000 or whatever it was that Bruce Schaller projected against the 250,000 who are commuting in and out every single day, it's just not right. And it also does not take into effect services like Lyft Line, which is our shared ride product. So we launched in 2011, 2012. And so we're a young industry to begin with. Lyft Line is even younger. In most markets, it's only been around since 2014 or 2015. Already, in most of our mature markets, between 30 and 40% of all of our rides are people choosing to ride with somebody else. That is really the id of what services like ours are all about, because if Jay and I are going in the same direction, why should we each be taking our own car? And it's priced right now to reflect that. This study didn't really factor those services in. Didn't factor in how people would be getting around otherwise, didn't really factor in things like lower quality of service on public transportation options over the last several years. Anybody who has, tried to use Metro recently, Safe Track existed for a reason. And so, yes, that was a report that got a lot of airtime, but there are a lot of other factors that really need to be considered.
Okay, food truck question. This is back to Old Town here. The questioner says, it's hard enough to find a parking spot in Old Town without the food truck taking a valuable...
That is a good thing.
Unless you live here.
Yeah.
Unless you live there, right? The city conducted surveys regarding possible locations not in the middle of Old Town. Most were opposed to food trucks there. Okay, so this questioner obviously does not want food trucks in Old Town. What would you say to people who are so resistant to having food trucks in Old Town?
Well,
What's the argument for it?
Sure. No, I think, again, I come back to the very basic principle. This is what we're talking about, regulations and government, and what is the role in government in all this, right? There is a public policy interest. There's an essential interest that our regulations should promote access to food, bottom line, right? That there's a legitimate public interest for that. I would take it a step further to increase access to affordable, freshly prepared food. And again, I would say, so if you and I go to lunch and we park downtown in front of Market Square, right, that parking space, we have an hour lunch, right, that parking space is going to serve the two of us, right? My truck parks there, I can service 100 people. I mean, it's really a question of utilization of the space. So yeah, that'd be my response to that.
I'm curious to know about the people's visions of their industry in the future. I'd like to ask the three of you. So Patricia Washington, if you could put on both of your hats, right? The restaurant hat, how's the restaurant scene going to change in the next, let's say, 20 years versus the hotel industry, how it might change in the next 20 years? And I think you hinted at a little bit of this, but sort of where do you see these industries headed in the next 20 years?
I don't know. I know, we try to predict like the next year or two ahead. I mean, it's really hard to predict. But I think I really like the trends. We haven't talked a lot about the consumers being at the center of all of this. I mean, that's what's exciting to me, especially being in marketing, where I see the democratization of marketing right now, where small organizations, small entities, businesses, everybody using new technologies today can access the consumer because the consumer is in charge. But the trends we're seeing are good trends for Alexandria. So what my predictions for Alexandria are: we're at the center of what people are desiring right now, what the trends are. They want places that are authentic, that are where they can meet the business owners. They can have a variety of food, from fast casual to a fine dining experience and everything in between. They want to have an experience that's local. That's why people come to Alexandria, because it's not contrived. It's been evolving for over 200 years, and you can't create that. No matter how hard the wharf may try to recreate that, you can't, because it's just so part of who we are. So I think the trends that people are looking for in terms of history, I'm looking at a lot of historic Alexandria Resource Commission people, my friends on the Hart Commission. They know that people are interested in engaging in history at a deeper level and getting into the controversies. When we had Mercy Street, for example, that the national television show that was based on our Civil War history, both sides of the story, not a whitewash story, but they loved it. People really want the real deal, and that's what we have. That's what our community is so passionate about preserving. And so I don't know. I just see our community continuing to get richer and evolving. I mean, we're having our What's New event on January 25th, and I'm so pleased about new restaurants. Like, like new restaurants from food trucks, new restaurants, period, that are coming into this market. So we're seeing this healthy turnover, new boutiques that are opening, a pop-up program that's getting more and more robust. So Alexandria is hot. I mean, you have developers like Asana looking at Alexandria. Why? Because they know we have something really valuable and special here. And so we want to keep it that way. We want to have growth, but smart growth.
So in terms of Lyft or ride hailing, ride sharing, what is that going to look like 20 years from now?
So I've laid out my vision a few times already, but it really comes down to the end of car ownership. We really think that if we can get the price of mobility down enough through autonomous vehicles, which are we believe are going to be providing the majority of our rides in major cities within about 5 years. Car ownership in major cities can all but end.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can you say that one more time? The majority of car vehicle rides in your major metropolitan areas are going to be majority autonomous within 5 years.
About that, yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to put a pin in that because that's a pretty good point, right?
These are our current projections, right? Yeah, exactly. I see a gentleman.
How long did this take?
Yep. People forget the iPhone just celebrated its 10th anniversary. 10 years from like the first one, and now it's completely ubiquitous. Our service, the very concept of hitting a button on your phone and a car showing up to take you wherever you need to go, not in 20 minutes, not in an hour, but in 2 to 5 minutes, completely foreign 10 years ago, completely foreign 7 years ago. And here we are now. Autonomous vehicles are coming fast, and car ownership is going to end as a result.
Food trucks. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, is this business model going to look pretty much the same, different? Will it be more available, less available?
So I think what we see is that what the trucks have been able to do is they provide a vehicle, pun intended, for folks who can pursue a dream or a passion without breaking the bank, and then move into other areas of food service. And I mentioned this to you, Michael. One of my own business, our largest thing that grows every year is our catering and special events business. We do anywhere from 12 to 15 weddings a year. And we do everything. We bartend, we set up, we break down, we'll do flowers. And, part of the reason why the trucks became so popular in 2010, 2011 is that folks were weary of the same old, right, and the same old chains. Now we are competing with the large catering companies. One of the largest jobs that we ever booked is the largest job we booked last year. Our quote came in $10,000 less than the next caterer, and this was a big name caterer. It was still a very profitable job for us. We actually just landed a wedding where the caterer provided your classic, what's those Greek pastries? The spanakopita, Chinese chicken thing, and the pre-made wontons, the thing that you've had at every awful happy hour and wedding thing you've ever done. And we're rolling in there and we're doing deep fried mac and cheese fritters on cones, ribs and wings. We're doing innovative food, and we're actually doing it for less than this big name catering company has. And so the trucks, just like we disrupted all the chains for lunch, now we're doing that with the caterers, and it's because of what the consumers want. And I think, like my business has gone on to open a brick and mortar restaurant. I think, gosh, and we're well over like the 40th in the region to have done that. We'll consider most of the guys on the trucks started out because we couldn't get into a brick and mortar, and this is our stepping stone. And I think we'll continue to see the guys do that. If anyone's familiar with Talkerian, Mike is a guy on the national level, a success story. Mike opened his truck when he has an associate's degree, like in snowboarding, right? Because he has a management and hospitality degree from University of Boulder, and I always tease him about that. Opened his truck at 24, opened up a kiosk at Unimarket at 26, his first brick and mortar at 28. He's now 30, he's about to turn 31, and he's got 4 self-standing units and got rid of the truck, right? I think we're going to see more and more of these success stories of these guys, and it is the truck that has allowed us to pursue that.
Mr. Shafroth, you mentioned something earlier that caught the attention of one of our question writers, which had to do with the medallions, the taxi medallions. So is a $1 million taxi badge medallion evidence of corruption? Is this everywhere in Alexandria too?
It's not everywhere. The medallions are really quite unique to New York, but they are a sign of investment and an investment that has really come up worth almost nothing to many of those drivers. So imagine, if you think about a pension, you work your whole life for a pension, and suddenly you're a 66-year-old taxi driver in New York, and that medallion is almost worthless. So when we talk about disruption, there's disruption that's good, and there's disruption that's not good.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there. Look, if you owned a Blockbuster video franchise, you were hurting when Netflix came around. And I think that it's sort of important to be able to distinguish between feeling for individuals and feeling for the industry. I don't think any of the industries that we're talking about having been disrupted would have been disrupted if they weren't ripe for disruption. Just because there were these $1 million medallions doesn't mean that system was a good one. It meant that there was something else that could come along and provide a similar or higher level of service that's better for the consumers, and frankly, in many ways, was better for a lot of drivers as well.
Patricia Washington, question from the audience. What is the major reason the hotel industry is realizing an increase in its numbers?
How about our marketing? we're doing a good job marketing. I hope that's one reason. But also, our region is becoming much more attractive when you look at our competitiveness with the Amazon HQ process. We're kind of in the middle of a growing region, but we're a jewel in the region.
Water taxi.
Yes, the high-speed water taxi. A lot of things are contributing to that. But, we can't be complacent because it is a very competitive environment. So, we've dramatically changed our marketing to almost completely digital from, majority print. But again, I do believe in this mix of high tech and high touch. Both are important. And also really, really important is what is the experience that we're creating, curating. The museums know about this. We are curating the Old Town experience. What do we want that to be? How can we up the ante a bit? How can we enhance that with our streetscapes, our cleanliness, the beautification, and programming? Exactly. So I think we have an opportunity with the King Street Waterfront Park opening this in the fall to take it up a notch and really showcase our historic waterfront in a new and beautiful way.
Mr. Shafron, this one's for you. Are Airbnb operators required to meet the fire safety regulations that Patricia Washington's members are?
Oh, you're asking me?
No, I was asking
No,
Mr. Shafron.
she's
Oh,
asking
yeah,
me,
oh,
he's
please.
asking me. Yes. It's been a long process in Virginia, but because first, Virginia being Virginia, you had to be authorized by the state legislature to be able, you had to be authorized by the legislature to create rules. So those rules are there. They're there to create balance with commercial establishments such as hotels, and obviously to protect citizens.
Question for Lyft. What if disruption doesn't work? This question writer has wrote that he or she has tried to participate in the disruptive economy by using Lyft, but wasn't able to connect with the Lyft website at the Dulles airport. What should this person done?
So I'm not entirely sure I understand the situation here. We are an app-based platform, and so you may run into trouble if you don't have Wi-Fi, if you don't have a good data connection. I guess that'll happen sometimes. I guess I would just ask to make sure that the person has successfully used Lyft before, had Lyft on install. So I'll take a step back. We are an app, so it's a multi-step process where first you're going to have to download the app, you're going to have to fill out and register an account, input a credit card, and then sometimes you'll have to figure out how to use it. It's very intuitive, I think, but not everybody sort of gets that. So there's that. Yeah, sometimes I'll have connectivity problems. Sometimes my phone just hasn't updated or will freeze. That isn't a great thing, but usually never lasts terribly long.
So this question is for Patricia Washington from the audience. What impact has MGM, the casino, National Harbor had on Alexandria?
Yeah, that is a good question. And I think a lot of people in this room were here before me, when National Harbor opened, and there was a lot of trepidation about National Harbor. It's going to drive visitors away from Alexandria. But as it turns out, that has not been the case. And in fact, because of smart growth thinking and preparation in response to National Harbor, we now have the Free King Street trolley connecting the metro to the waterfront. And we have other improvements also to emphasize our connectivity, which is one of our strongest assets, is the fact that we have multimodal connectivity by bike, by boat, by car, by train, by plane. So MGM opening, it gives us much more of a ability to say, from Alexandria, you can go to MGM, you can go to DC, but you can come back to a place that is like home, like is less, it's calm, it's welcoming, it's beautiful, and there's so much to do here, but also we can be a great home base for a regional visit.
Question for the food trucks. What regulatory regime would you recommend for the city, if any? If you were going to wave a magic wand and sort of change the rules of Alexandria, what would you do?
So the number one thing we want to regulate food trucks for health and safety, and food trucks actually currently have to meet all the same regulations as a restaurant does, in addition to the VDOT, right? So actually we're more heavily regulated than food trucks. And currently, all the DOH regulations, having a 3-compartment sink, a refrigerator below 40 degrees, your hot food over 145 degrees, a certified food safety manager on board, we currently comply with all of those. I think what would benefit Alexandria and everybody who wants food trucks is to allow food trucks to vend from a legal commercial parking space.
Any legal commercial parking space?
Right, with like some reasonable restrictions.
Like
So
around Market Square, for example.
right. With some reasonable restrictions, so that you're not blocking, you're not so many. And what we have in DC is you can't be 20 feet from a crosswalk, so you have sight lines. There's no vending in residential areas. That's why I use the word commercial or a metered parking space in that case. And let's see where people want to eat. I mean, this is what this is about. This is about meeting the consumer where they want to be. And you like I've said before, you can't engineer that. You have to just allow it to evolve.
Patricia Washington, what would your members think about if Alexandria allowed food trucks to park in any legal commercial space, including the ones around Market Square and or in front of their restaurants?
As I said, our role as a tourism marketing organization is to promote our assets. So I'm in the promoting our existing assets, not in, creating assets. As I said, the policy has been developed. I think it's a balanced one. It's what the city settled on. So I'm good with that. We have great restaurants and we have some food
You're good
trucks.
with the existing one. I was asking you about a theoretical future in which the food trucks could park in any space.
That's too broad. I think.
I was asking you to respond to what he just said.
Well, what I'm talking about is an approach that is neighborhood-based is what we have, and I think that's a good one. Also, we have food trucks for special events, which I think is great. If there's a festival in Waterfront Park, as we have a lot of them, you'll see food trucks there. You'll see food trucks at Orinoco Park for the city birthday celebration. So those enhance those kinds of outdoor events, and I think we should continue to have them for those events.
And Michael, let me add, like some of what we have in language in other jurisdictions, there needs to be things like a minimum sidewalk width requirement to prevent congestion. Again, that's based on public health and safety. In DC, food trucks cannot vend immediately outside a sidewalk cafe. Again, that's based on congestion and traffic and ease and flow for things like that. But it's about creating these criteria for the trucks to operate in an environment. And then what we did in DC is that we supported a very aggressive fining system for the violators, which we continue to do because we don't take for granted in DC. We have a pretty liberal set of regulatory environment. So it's in DC, for example, it's a $2,000 fine for vending in an illegal location. And we never opposed that because that's the cost of what we got in DC.
So Patricia Washington was saying, we have this long process that led to the regulations we've got now. There are lots of people that are happy with that. Do you expect that the status quo will remain in the indefinite future, or are you hopeful that you might be able to get some regulations that are sort of would allow more food trucks in Alexandria?
Myself?
Yeah.
I'm an optimist. Yeah, sure. No, I think what we saw is that so the very first thing that the regulations in 2014 is they established a regulatory regime. We have a statutory definition of what a food truck is and is not. We have a set of rules it has to comply by, and that's all part of catching up, right, for what the modern industry is. And importantly, we have a set of fines, right, and we have agencies and government to report violations to, right. You need that groundwork. We now have that. And the food trucks came, and the sky didn't fall, right. Everybody, I remember that day at that hearing, and I mean, it was just the most panicked. And like I said, we do this in many jurisdictions, and it was just a very unfortunate day. So here we are, right? And restaurants aren't closing, and in fact, food trucks are in brick and mortars, and so I hope that lays a groundwork for folks to say, all right, right. And this is what I mean. It's like all this is driven by cultural and economic insecurities. I hope that's just, I hope people understand what I mean by that. It's just like we're going to put a food truck in Old Town and it's going to change the nature of Old Town. No. Old Town is amazing and it is wonderful. And putting one truck outside of Market Square that serves popcorn is not going to change the character of Old Town, right? And if you think it does, then you're not giving Old Town enough credit for how amazing and special it is. And so, I'm an optimist. I think we have a groundwork to extend vending opportunities. And like I said, the reasons I do is I do believe that people should have a path to small business ownership that doesn't break the bank and put them into thousands, if not millions of dollars into debt. And I believe that folks should have access to food and creative and affordable, innovative options.
Question for Frank Shaprock. Is Comcast a monopoly? Yes. Or is it part of disruption? In other words, is there no competition for Comcast? Yeah. I think the question writer did not put this on here, but there is competition to Comcast that's not in Alexandria, right? So explain how this happens.
Specific to Alexandria.
The world of how you can be reached on your iPhone, in your living room, in your bedroom is changed profoundly. It will continue to evolve, and the question is, under the current administration and Congress, who are going to be making the rules, and how are they going to protect your individual right and competition so there's more than one provider? And I don't even know whether the government's going to be open after February 8th, much less how that's going to be resolved.
Well, what about, so there is a competition to Comcast. Why isn't it in Alexandria? What's preventing Alexandria from having competition to Comcast?
I don't have the answer.
You don't have the answer to that. Okay. Well, then I'll move on to Lyft then. So, question from the audience. If one of the disruptive businesses injures or cheats a customer, who protects the customer?
A couple things to keep in mind. I mean, we are fully insured, especially when we've got a passenger in a vehicle. I mean, that their safety is absolutely paramount. I'm not sure I understand the concept of when somebody's going to get cheated. Unlike for example the taxi industry, and I'm not saying the taxi industry cheated anyone. I'm sure everybody's got their own anecdotes. We know at all times, you know at all times who your driver is. We know who the driver is, what kind of car they're in, what their license plate is, and we have a tracking of exactly where you originated and where you're going, and we can sort of project what that trip should have cost. If you feel like you have been charged unfairly, if you feel like the driver was unsafe, you give a bad review. Usually when I've seen anything under a 3-star review, you'll almost immediately get contacted by a customer representative asking for more feedback. Oftentimes there will be a full reimbursement, and you're going to be guaranteed to not be matched with that driver again. And if driver ratings fall below a certain fairly stringent threshold, then they won't be able to drive on our platform anymore. And so there are a whole lot of consumer safeguards in place to prevent that kind of a thing.
Let me add, I'm a big Lyft guy, and I actually had an experience with a Lyft driver where I felt they took the longest way possible to get me to where I was going. And to your point, the rating systems, after every Lyft ride, you're asked to give feedback to your driver. You can tip the driver if you want to. Far more intense than anything I've had in any sort of comparable experience. But then I emailed, and like in an hour, I got a credit for my ride. I got a super apologetic email, and it was a platform that was far more dynamic and responsive, providing better service to me than anything I've encountered in any other and that includes your competitors, even though if you don't, in addition to taxi cabs. But the rating system, and Airbnb has this as well, where there's a mechanism in there where this largely self-regulates. Same with food, actually.
So are you going to set up a similar system for your food trucks?
It's called Yelp.
Yelp, yeah.
We and Yelp and Facebook reviews, and yeah, we are rated to death.
All right, so there's a Rate My Professor as a website too. I'm sure you rate very much. So Mr. Shafroth, so does the city have a plan for all of this? Do you think Alexandria is sort of prepared? Do they have a strategy? Are they ready for this? Can they benefit from this financially?
The city has a plan, and they actually released something on the 17th of this month. So I think they've been thinking it through. It's constantly evolving, right? Think of how fast this has changed just from 5 years ago. So trying to stay ahead of it and be responsive to people is important. But I'm pleased that they did adopt something. They put it out. They made it on the basis of hearings. And it's a hard city. I know a number of years ago, I took my wife down to City Hall, and she said, I didn't know this place existed. And I don't know how many of you have been to a city council session, with the exception of former city council members. But my experience is they're pretty much the same people. In fact, sometimes I've wondered if they've ever gone home or they just live there. So it's also important and difficult for cities to make sure they're hearing back from all their citizens. There's always a very hard core who have very strong opinions, which they opine upon frequently. But the vast majority don't.
All right, we're going to go round the horn here we're about to wrap up here. But I would love any sort of closing thoughts or messages you would like to impart to the audience, or for perpetuity on YouTube. Any other questions you weren't asked that you wanted to be asked, or other things that you said that you haven't said yet? So we'll start with Jay.
Well, I hope it wasn't super negative. It felt like it was a little bit. We're here in Alexandria. We love this community. A number of our members live in Alexandria. This is part of what drove it, because they had to drive to Arlington or DC in order to vend. And like you said, we have a foundation of something that I'm optimistic that we can expand. And again, because it's good for folks to have choices for food, and it's good to have an environment where people can open up and run their own small business.
Yeah, the consumer relationship is paramount in any kind of a disruptive business, and to make sure that we continue to be the disruptors rather than the disruptees, I'd love to hear more feedback from ways that we can constantly be improving the platform, improving the service. One of the good things about using services like ours is that there is this constant feedback mechanism. I urge you to use it. If you have a good ride, I urge you to give the driver 5 stars and leave positive feedback. And certainly if you have had a bad ride, we very much want to know that as well. And any ideas that anyone has to continually make the product better, we're all ears.
I think as a city, and I'm looking at the mayor right now who's here, I think the city is known for being forward-looking, progressive and just sort of balancing interests, balancing, I think that's the essence of who we are, is balancing the future with our storied and treasured past. And I think that's the world in which we live in, and I think a lot of our public officials are doing that, and a lot of our concerned citizens in this room are constantly doing that. How do we embrace technologies and embrace the future trends to benefit Alexandria now and in the future?
With the exception of you all here tonight, everyone else in Alexandria is growing older. My father did not drive a car for the last 20 years of his life. What that meant is he was home by himself for almost that entire 20 years. And he felt, in lots of ways, like he was locked in a prison instead of living in a city. So an important challenge, I think, for the city, and particularly for this group, is to think through, because healthcare is enabling people to live longer than any previous generation in American history. How do we think about people to make sure they're not homebound and they take advantage of some of these new technologies, and they're protected when they get to do it, but it enables them to get the healthcare they need. It enables them to get access to other people and not live a lonely older life.
And on that note, we are going to conclude. Thank you all very much for coming.